Hi, my friends. Welcome back. Today we are going to keep reading Leon and the Spitting Image by Alan Kurzweil. And we just started this book yesterday, and we got to know our main character, Leon. He is going into his very first day of fourth grade, and he lives in kind of a wacky hotel where his mom is the night manager. So we're going to pick up with Chapter 3, The Hag. It was raining heavily when Emma and Leon Ziesel pushed through the revolving door of the Trimore and walked to the curb. "Did you remember your travel book, sweetie?" Leon patted his backpack. "Right here, Mom. How about your milk and taxi money?" "Check and double check," he said reassuringly. "Oh, I almost forgot." Emma Ziesel handed her son a string-tied box. "What's inside?" "Dough balls. Frau Haffenreffer baked an extra batch just for you." Emma Ziesel gave Leon a quick motherly inspection. "Your laces, sweetie." "They're fine," he answered, mildly annoyed. He craned his neck toward the street and looked for an available taxi. Since the middle of third grade, Leon had been taking taxis by himself. He had no choice. The school bus didn't stop near the hotel, and his mom almost never finished work early enough to make the trip with him. After accompanying her son to school on a few trial runs, Emma Ziesel had handed Leon a blank notebook. "What's this for?" he had asked suspiciously. He disliked anything that involved writing. "It's to register the driver's names," said Emma Ziesel. "You can get them off the hack license." "Hack license?" "The driver's picture ID," she explained. "It's always posted. It's the law. And if you start getting goosey, just ask the cabbie where he comes from and add that to your notes." Leon took the assignment seriously. He returned from his maiden voyage proudly announcing, "I got a guy named Cesar Viana, and you know what? He's from the Philippines." A few seconds later, Leon said, "Where exactly are the Philippines, Mom?" Almost before Leon finished asking the questions, Emma Ziesel whipped out the atlas she stashed behind the reception desk and showed him. On his second taxi trip, Leon flagged down Juan Pablo Zapata from Mexico, and on his third, he hailed Push Singh from India. Each name and nationality went straight into the travel book, and so began the taxi driver collection. For Leon's 9th birthday, Emma Ziesel bought her son a huge foam-backed map of the world and a box of pushpins tipped with colorful plastic banners. From then on, Leon recorded every country he visited on the map that hung above his bed, as well as in his travel book. By the time 4th grade rolled around, he had collected 37 nations and 19 states. Leon lifted an arm and expertly extended one finger toward the oncoming traffic. Despite the downpour, he managed to nab a taxi almost at once. Drivers generally picked him over businessmen urgently waving briefcases. He gave the cabbie the address of his school, then squinched and clucked, hoping for an Alaska or Botswana or, best of all, a Suriname. Suriname was the one country he still needed to complete South America. Leon opened his eyes and looked at the name on the driver's photo ID. Larasolo Skekas. He recorded the name. Let me re-say that name. Ladisolo Sekech. He recorded the name in his travel book and said, "Excuse me, Mr. It's pronounced Sekech," said the driver, "like you're in your American baseball." "Thanks," Leon said. "Could you tell me where you come from, Mr. Sekech?" "Why should you know?" the driver asked suspiciously. "It's for my collection," Leon said. "What collection?" the driver demanded. Leon had his routine down pat. "Some kids collect baseball cards. I collect taxi drivers." The cabbie hesitated. "Please," Leon said. He held up the travel book. "It's important." "Hungary," the driver mumbled. "Yes!" Leon exclaimed. "Why are you so happy? This is good?" "This is great! You're my first Hungary!" "And you, little boy," said the now smiling driver, "you are my first taxi driver collector." Leon closed the travel book and gazed out the window. A mail truck idling at a traffic light made him think of envelopes, which in turn made him think of the confidential report he had uncovered the night before. The memory prompted a sudden, uncontrolled shiver. The assessments from Sloat, Toothacher, and Juice seemed so unfair, and it didn't help that the identity of his 4th grade teacher was a total mystery. Leon tried to forget about school, but he couldn't. When he struggled to break through the red string on the pastry box, a voice from the home report popped back into his head. "Nimble fingers make for nimble minds." What lame brain thought that one up? The only good thing about the first day of school was that Leon would see his two best friends, P.W. and Lily Matisse. They had both been away all summer. P.W. was called P.W. because his real name, Fiawinet Dabanandana, tended to scare people off. P.W. was a short kid with a long name whose parents came from Thailand. He loved math and building things. He hated spelling and keeping quiet. He had a reputation for being a bit of a smart aleck. As for Lily Matisse, she was lean and lanky like Leon and had buck teeth. Dentists must love that girl, Leon's mother had once conjectured. She was an awesome jump roper, a gifted gymnast, and the daughter of the school art teacher, Miss Jasbro, which meant she knew a lot of stuff other kids didn't. "Little boy, you hear me?" said the taxi driver. "We are arrived." Leon paid the fare and dashed out into the rain. He hadn't even made it up the limestone steps when he took his first tumble of the school year. He fell hard, face forward. Dough balls rolled down the steps and into the gutter. Embarrassed and bruised, Leon tried to pick himself up. He couldn't. A very large army boot was pressing down on one of his untied shoelaces. Intentionally. "Hey there, Zitzel," a voice bellowed. "Welcome back." The owner of the boot completed his greeting with a brutal punch to the arm. Leon winced but said nothing. He knew his attacker would soon lose interest and seek out other targets. The assault came from a beefy 11-year-old boy named Henry Lumpkin. Henry Lumpkin had been torturing Leon nearly as long as teachers had. Lumpkin's methods differed from theirs, however. To inflict pain, he relied on dead arms and dodgeballs, not confidential reports. He was a thoroughly nasty life form who picked up nicknames the way crooks acquire aliases. Some kids called him Lumpkin the Pumpkin because of his bright orange hair and his pumpkin-y shape. Others referred to him as Hank the Tank, in recognition of the armored body hidden under the olive drab army jacket he always wore to school. And still others identified him as the lethal launcher because of the force and accuracy of his dodgeball throws. But to Leon, he was just Lumpkin, a blockhead and a bully whose sudden and unpredictable attentions always spelled trouble. Leon stayed put on the ground for almost a minute, even though it was raining. When the coast was clear, he darted into the school. Lily, Matisse, and PW were waiting near the water fountain. "Hey," said PW. "Hey," said Leon. "Hey," said Lily Matisse. "Hey," said Leon. "You okay?" Lily Matisse asked. "Why shouldn't he be okay?" PW said. "Well, for starters, he's limping," Lily Matisse observed. "Plus, he's rubbing his arm." Leon glanced at the human tank rolling down the hall. "Did Lumpkin do that?" Lily Matisse asked. "Yup." "We'd better take cover," PW advised. The three friends hung up their rain gear and entered the classroom. "Holy cow," said PW. "Geez," Leon exclaimed. "My mom told me our homeroom was going to be different," said Lily Matisse. "This is so weird," PW said enthusiastically. He pointed to the back of the room at a massive metal cabinet mounted on heavy rubber wheels. "Look at the lock on that thing. What do you think is inside?" "What about those?" Leon said, gawking at a series of wall posters featuring severed hands. These are the posters. "Sure beats those poems Mr. Juiced had on his wall last year," said PW. "Don't count on it," said Lily Matisse. "My mom told me—" "Here it comes," PW interrupted. "Previews of upcoming attractions. Let's hear what your mom says." "Well, my mom told me—" Thring! The school bell put a stop to Lily Matisse's update. A thin shadow darkened the frosted glass of the classroom door. Leon squinched and clucked. "Please make this teacher better than the last ones," he told himself. The knob turned and the door opened. When Leon unsquinched, he found himself in the presence of a tall, thin woman wearing a long black cape. Not a Batman cape. More like the kind of cape Florence Nightingale would have fastened around her neck before heading off to nurse the wounded. Leon stared at the clasp on the cape. For a moment, he thought the clasp was formed by two yellow marbles linked by a chain. But the more he looked at the marbles, the more they seemed to look at him. All of a sudden, he understood why. "They're not marbles," he said to himself. "They're eyeballs." Leon lifted his gaze from the glass eyes to his teacher's eyes. Two dull black beads set deep into a narrow face framed by a helmet of unnaturally black hair. The severe hairdo exaggerated the thinness of the head and drew attention away from a mouth so pinched it looked as though it had been stitched in place by a doll maker who had pulled too hard on the thread. The teacher hung up her long black cape and revealed a long black dress underneath. Not everything she wore was black. Between the bottom of her dress and the top of her precisely knotted lace-up boots, which were also black, there was a small stretch of leg covered by pantyhose the color of cooked liver. Leon wasn't the only one shocked by the new fourth-grade teacher. The rest of the class was equally amazed. They all watched in nervous silence as she marched over to her desk and began emptying her satchel. Leon made a mental list. 1 clipboard, 1 container of cottage cheese, small curd, 1 box of chalk, 1 chalk holder, 1 metal pointer, 1 brass key. It didn't take a hotel detective to figure out that the key must go to the giant padlock on the cabinet. Leon observed his teacher insert a piece of chalk into the sleeve of the chalk holder and adjust it like a lipstick. She then wrote her name on the board with terrifying neatness. Miss Hagmeyer. PW leaned over to Leon and whispered, "Hag is right." "Suspend the verbal games at once," Miss Hagmeyer snapped. PW, lowering his voice to a murmur, said, "How'd she hear us?" "Must have radar," Leon whispered back. "I do," Miss Hagmeyer said. So I advise all of you to keep quiet and concentrate on the matters at hand. She went back to writing on the blackboard. There, she said moments later, turning to face the room. I would like all of you to read out loud what I have written. The students dutifully repeated the phrase, a place for everything and everything in its place. Louder, Miss Hagmeyer commanded. The class said the phrase once again. Better, she allowed. Those 9 words will guide us throughout the year. There will be a proper place for books, a proper place for supplies, and a proper place for worksheets. There will be a proper place for study, a proper place for play, and a proper place for each of you to sit. With that, Miss Hagmeyer put down the chalk and called everyone up to the front of the room. She then reached for her clipboard and pointer and began reading off the names of the students. Last name first, first name last. The roll call started with Breed, Antoinette, and finished, inevitably, with Ziesel, Leon. After stating each name, Miss Hagmeyer aimed her metal pointer at a chair. Leon ended up at the very rear of the room, sandwiched between a desk assigned to Warchowski Thomas and the padlock cabinet. Though the seat assignment separated Leon from his friends, it did have one advantage. It was beyond the range of Lumpkin's spitballs, noogies, and dead arms. Breed Antoinette wasn't so lucky. Because of the configuration of the chairs, she got stuck directly in front of the class bully. The moment Lumpkin thought Miss Hagmeyer wasn't looking, he reached forward to give Antoinette a poke with a brand new, highly sharpened number 3 pencil. Number 3s being the ones with the extra hard lead. But before he could complete his attack, Miss Hagmeyer whipped around. Stop that at once, she barked. Did you fail to register my earlier warning? I hear everything, Mr. Lumpkin. Everything. But I didn't touch her, he protested. You were about to. I heard you leaning over, and don't bother denying it. Miss Hagmeyer lifted her unnaturally black hair to reveal a truly shocking pair of ears. These little beauties never fail me. Leon found himself gawking. Even from the back of the room, he could see that the so-called little beauties were neither little nor beautiful. Quite the opposite. They were huge and gnarled, like the giant mushrooms one sometimes finds growing on rotten tree stumps. It's never a good idea to praise your own body parts. It's an even worse idea when the body parts in question resemble a primordial fungus. Miss Hagmeyer must have sensed as much because she quickly let go of her hair. Now that we have established that I can hear you, she said to the class, it is time to find out whether you can hear me. She tapped her blackboard motto. I did not invent this 9-word phrase. A medieval master who trained apprentices composed it, which is fitting since our year together will concentrate on the Middle Ages, the period between the 5th and 15th century that gave the world horseshoes, hard soap, and the horizontal loom. And as you will soon discover, the Middle Ages emphasized discipline and charity. That I shall supply. The Middle Ages also put stock in obedience and diligence. That you shall provide. And by stitching together my discipline and your dutiful diligence, we will create a glorious tapestry of learning. Do you all follow what I am saying? A hesitant round of, yes, Miss Hagmeyer, filtered through the room. Good. Now some of you might be wondering, how will we create this glorious tapestry of learning? I shall answer that question by quoting another medieval saying. Listen closely. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I make and I understand. In this class you will make, and by making you will learn. You will exercise your fingers, and by doing so exercise your brains. That is the classical way. That is the way of all apprentices wishing to become masters. Leon gulped. Mention of fingers never sounded promising. Miss Hagmeyer walked over to the desk and grabbed the metal pointer. She held it up in the air and said, in short, I will make your minds and your fingers nimble by teaching you how to use this. And that's when Leon learned the horrible truth. The metal pointer wasn't a metal pointer. It was a giant instructional sewing needle. So, tomorrow when we read chapter 4, we will figure out, maybe, what that sewing needle is all about. So I will see you guys then. Bye.